In 1980, Anton LaVey was brought to the FBI's attention on completely fabricated accusations against him. Some idiots today still make a big to-do out of this obscure absurdity. We'll talk about that, and also answer some other listener mail with some questions on pseudo-Satanism, comments on some of the other more recent episodes of Satansplain, a crazy satanic anecdote, and more.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain, Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Welcome to episode number 37 of Satansplain. Magister Bill M. here. You might recall that a while back here on Satansplain, I featured a recording of a discussion I had in 2016 on the topic of the Satanic Witch, and that was from a show that used to be on Radio Free Satan called Dark Voices. Well, it seems DJ Vespa from that show is bringing her show back. Recently, I joined her and a panel of other Satanists, and when she relaunches her show, that will presumably be one of the first episodes you'll hear. When that will happen and where you'll be able to listen to it, I don't know. But as soon as I do know, and as soon as it's out, I'll certainly be reporting it through the usual Satansplain channels, Facebook, Twitter, the main Satansplain website, the usual. In the meantime, I'm going to spend this episode reading and responding to some listener emails. Let's start with this email from Shelley. Shelley wrote in with some thoughts and a question regarding the previous episode of Satansplain. She writes, "Thank you for your episode on the oddities from the Church of Satan of the 1970s. I'm a history buff, and I always love a good stroll into the past. Your episode got me wondering about the members of the Church of Satan from those early years. Are any of them still active, or at least keep in touch? Are there any interviews or anecdotes with these members that have been publicly released? I would love to read or hear about their experiences during that inaugural decade." So I replied to Shelley. I'm happy that she enjoyed the episode, so thank you, Shelley. As for members still active from the 1970s, some certainly exist. Of course, let's keep in mind that the period I was talking about was about 50 years ago, so I'm sure many members from those days have since passed away, or perhaps otherwise fell out of touch, but some are certainly still around. I've run into some. Back in 2006, I was out in Los Angeles during the High Mass we did on 6606, and while I was waiting in line to go into the building, there was a guy standing behind me who was quite up there in age, and we chatted for a bit. Also, at the 50th anniversary celebrations we had in New York, there was a magister who had joined in the 70s and shared some of his thoughts. But as for publicly released interviews or anecdotes from members who were in the organization at the time, well, the obvious things that come to mind are interviews from that actual time period, such as the 1968 Satanist documentary, or interviews that showed up in books or magazines from around that time. But if you're asking for a more recent interview with members who were members from that time and joined at a young enough age that, they're not dead yet. They're, probably now in their 70s or 80s or 90s. I don't know of any offhand, any interviews like that. There was that documentary on Anton LaVey, Into the Devil's Den, which had interviews with people who personally knew Anton LaVey, but I think maybe didn't join until the 1980s. So, honestly, I don't know. I don't know of any public interviews that were done in recent years with members who are that old. Satanists, for starters, tend to be pretty recluse, and old people in general tend to be recluse too. So even if you were to find a Church of Satan member who was a member in 1973, they may very well say, "Who are you? Beat it, kid. Leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you." I probably would at that age. You never know, though. And next, a listener named Heli, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct, wrote to me. He says he has read the Satanic Bible and understood a fraction of it, and his question is, what essay can I read along with the Satanic Bible so my view of what Satanism is can be perfected and understood correctly? Well, the Satanic Bible covers a lot of topics, a lot of different topics, and I would say there's no single essay that can properly elaborate on all of it. But there are many essays that each elaborate on part of it, different parts of it, in different ways. I would say, first, check out any and all essays on churchofsatan.com. You can find essays there from Dr. LaVey, from Magus Peter H. Gilmore, Maga Paganodramia, and so on, including a section called Great Minds. In that section of the website, you'll find essays from other Church of Satan members, including me. I would say, though, that before all of that, maybe just read through the FAQ on churchofsatan.com. There's a nice comprehensive FAQ there. There's also a separate essay about the Satanic Bible itself, how it came to be. But otherwise, I would say the go-to essay is going to be different depending on which chapter of the book you're talking about. Now, if you have a more specific question about something in the Satanic Bible, well, you can always email me, bill@satansplain.com, because the way I see it, if you have a question, then there may be a chance that other Satanists out there have the same question, or a similar one, or would like to hear the answer and could benefit from hearing about it on Satansplain. So, email me, bill@satansplain.com is the email address if you have questions like that. A couple of episodes back, I talked about Marilyn Manson, and I got some feedback about that episode. Here is some of an email I got. A listener named Angela. Angela wrote, "Dear Magister M, I am a subscriber to your show, Satansplain. I was thinking about what you were saying about Marilyn Manson last week, and these are my thoughts about that. Isn't it rude to ask a person if he or she is a member of the Church of Satan? I think the answer should always be none of your business. There is only a 50-50 chance that the answer offered is an honest one. If a Satanist wants you to know about his or her relationship with the Church of Satan, the Satanist will make it known. If a Satanist doesn't want you to know, he or she will mislead you, so how can you really know?" She also goes on to say, "Marilyn Manson is a smart guy and a clever artist, but that is just my opinion. His songs have a lot of blasphemy too, so I can see how he attracts atheists and Satanists. I've noticed Manson using some of the tricks that are spelled out in Anton LaVey's books. LaVey gave Manson a Church of Satan title as a gift. Every good Satanist knows that you can't gift Satanism to someone else unless you are the high priest of the Church of Satan. What a rare gift from a rare man." Actually, I would say he's not gifting Satanism, but gifting, a membership in the Church of Satan. And anyway, Angela goes on to say, "Maybe Manson only accepted it to be polite or to use for his scary image in his autobiography that he wrote when he was just 29 years old, and that was 25 years ago, so I don't see any real evidence that Manson genuinely identifies as a Satanist or gives any shits about the Church of Satan at all. It seems that he really admired Anton LaVey, though, and I can't say I blame him. I was a Manson fan before I became a LaVey fan, and through Manson, I thought the Satanism was a joke. I thought it was part of his show. Just like other ordinary people did, I thought Satanists were devil-worshipping murderers with tattoos on their faces. And Marilyn Manson made me curious, so I researched online. Lo and behold, I did encounter some actual Satanists who turned out to be pretty cool and who directed me to the FAQs on the Church of Satan website, churchofsatan.com. It didn't take long to read them, and suddenly every misconception I once held about Satanism vanished. Marilyn Manson did not tell me to join the Church of Satan or to be a Satanist. However, I am not the only one who credits Manson for directing me down a left-hand path. Marilyn Manson's music made me curious about Satanists, but it wouldn't have worked on me if I wasn't already curious." So, Angela here is an example of one thing I had mentioned on that episode, which is that there are members of the Church of Satan who did find out about the Church of Satan and Anton LaVey through Marilyn Manson and his interviews. And that fact stands regardless of how committed or uncommitted Marilyn Manson himself may be when it comes to Satanism. But regarding Angela's first point of if somebody were to ask you if you were a member of the Church of Satan, shouldn't the appropriate response be, hey, none of your business? Well, to put this in context, I had mentioned in that episode that Marilyn Manson was on Bill O'Reilly's show, and O'Reilly asked him point blank if he was a member of the Church of Satan. And I wrote back to Angela and I said, true, it would be generally rude to ask somebody so bluntly about, their COS affiliation. And normally, yeah, you would be in the right to answer, hey, none of your business. But let's keep in mind that this was Marilyn Manson we're talking about. This was somebody who, by then, was already notoriously known for a lot of shocking things, including things like being called satanic, rightly or wrongly, by conservatives. I mean, he had put out an album called Antichrist Superstar. He talked candidly about meeting Anton LaVey in his autobiography and so on. So, given all of that, I think it was only to be expected that an interviewer, let alone an interviewer like Bill O'Reilly, would ask something about Marilyn Manson's Satanism affiliation and, want to hear an answer. So it's not like Bill O'Reilly was outing him. Manson had already made his affiliation quite known, and the public already associated Marilyn Manson with Satanism by this point anyway. So, but, high-profile, loudly out-of-the-closet people like Marilyn Manson aside, I would agree that, yes, in general, it's nobody's business as to whether or not a particular individual is or isn't a member of the Church of Satan. We do keep a membership status and information private for obvious reasons. But once again, in the case of Marilyn Manson, this is somebody who was quite a public figure in the Church of Satan, so I would say that's a different case. David wrote to me and had asked me who was the comedian featured in episode number 35 of Satansplain, and I wrote back to him and I explained I have not featured any comedians on Satansplain thus far. I have most certainly featured comedians on my actual comedy podcast. That's my other podcast, The Devil's Mischief. But I don't feature comedians on Satansplain. My guess, however, is that David was referring to the commercial I had played in that Satansplain episode for The Devil's Mischief. That's what those clips are, commercials, advertisements. They're not part of Satansplain, really. They're not content. Maybe some of you listeners enjoy them in and of themselves, and that's fine, in which case you should go listen to The Devil's Mischief on Radio Free Satan, but a show's commercial is not the same as the show's content. And there are legal reasons I feel compelled to mention all of this. In any case, the comedian you heard in that commercial for The Devil's Mischief that I happened to play in episode number 35 was Eddie Izzard. I could say a lot about him, but, talking about comedians in detail is more of what I do on The Devil's Mischief. So listen to The Devil's Mischief if you want the comedy. Actually, speaking, though, of shows on Radio Free Satan, congratulations. I got to mention this to Warlock Jeff Ivins on episode number 666 of The Metro. At the time that I'm recording my voice right now, that episode has not aired. But I did get word that it was going to be a 2-hour extravaganza. Quite a milestone, episode 666. I will definitely be listening to episode number 666 of The Metro when it is out. And that will, of course, be on radiofreesatan.com and some other places. Next email, Anthony writes, we are well aware of those that want to call themselves Satanists without agreeing with some or even most of the Satanic Bible. So my question is, why do you think they want to call themselves Satanists while disagreeing with the religion/philosophy? Good question. We've had this religion called Satanism established now for over half a century. The Satanic Bible has been out for over half a century. Now, the word Satanism has existed for centuries. Occultism has existed for centuries. devil worshippers have existed for centuries, but an actual codified religion calling itself Satanism did not exist, it seems, until the Church of Satan was founded in 1966. And by actual codified religion, I mean a religion, not just some blasphemous theatrics like the Black Mass or random lunatics hearing voices in their heads, but a religion complete with its own, clearly delineated philosophy, ethics code, and so on. Not just something overly simplified and vague and stupid like, deny Jesus, whatever that means. That's not a religion. So, when you have an established religion with a specific name and established doctrines, why would you take that label and apply it on something which doesn't fit it? And to be clear, the people who do these sorts of things are not just practicing a different denomination of the same religion. Devil worship, for example, is just so fundamentally different from what Satanism is that there is no rational reason to consider it a different denomination of the same thing. So back to Anthony's question, I wrote to him and I said, the name Satanism certainly triggers an emotional response, as Satan is mythology's most notorious bad guy, and that was one of the reasons why we adopted the label for ourselves in the first place. Again, there were notions of Satanism with a lowercase s around before the Church of Satan, such as how the word gets used in the 1934 film, The Black Cat, a movie which we have on the Church of Satan suggested film list, and even earlier than that, in earlier centuries, referring to vague things like, homosexuality is a Satanism, denying God is a Satanism. Again, no actual religious components to it beyond theatrical blaspheming of Christianity, really. So the bottom line is that people fancying themselves as Satanists, despite not being actual Satanists, must be getting their definition of Satanism from somebody or something other than us. So what is the source of that? Ultimately, I would say that the source is Christian scare propaganda. You'll see a Jack Chick tract or a similar thing from Christians that says, hey, everybody, there are these dangerous people out there who worship the devil, and they're called Satanists, and they do all of these horrific crimes. And some people may have gotten their idea of Satanism from fictional people in a horror movie, like, the Black Cat, like I mentioned, or some heavy metal musician claiming to be a Satanist, or, of course, idiots like Kevin Solling's political stunt group, the Satanic Temple. But in all of these cases, their idea of Satanism is stemming from a Christian definition of the term. Now, I know people from the Satanic Temple try to deny that and say, oh no, Bill, we take Satan as a symbol of social justice and empathy. And No. That's the thing they tried to spin after the fact. Kevin Solling's group, the Satanic Temple, the organization started with hired actors and professed to be devil worshippers. You don't have to take my word for it. You can research this, look this up, find the proof of it on your own. So they went directly off the Christian propaganda definition of Satanism again. They did it precisely to shock Christians. That is not our reason for the name Satanism. If you want the reasons why we call it Satanism, well, I say that in every episode of Satansplain. You listen to the first 60 seconds of every Satansplain episode, and I list what those reasons are. Now, aside from things that ultimately trace back to Christian scare propaganda, occasionally you'll get a clinical narcissist who finds that he can't cut it with the actual Church of Satan, or schizophrenically wants to combine the elements of our stuff with voices in his head or other occult dabblings and erroneously call this mishmash of stuff Satanism. And some of these people manage to convince others that they're the real deal. Oh, I am a Satanist. That, I would say, seems to be part of a larger phenomenon of people who fancy themselves as being part of some ideology or subculture, maybe because the label gives them an identity and a certain thrill, despite them acting mostly as a caricature of the thing in question. So, to explain what I mean, to give you like another example, there were people in the early 70s who fancied themselves hippies. Now, there were actual hippies, as a collectivist movement. But then you had these people who called themselves hippies just because they bought a Peter, Paul, and Mary album and they hated Richard Nixon. And again, this happens with other groups. There are stoners these days who get into postmodernism, relativism, and they dig kung fu movies and they think, oh, I'm a Buddhist now. And, quite different from the actual Buddhists you might find in the Far East. And, we also see lots of people today who say, oh, I'm an LGBT ally, an activist. I'm an activist because I share memes about it on social media. And, that's not the same thing as being one of the people who were at Stonewall. You know what I'm saying? So my point is perhaps there will always be the pseudos and the wannabes in any group, including Satanism, as long as people get some sense of personal significance from the label, even if it's a false sense of significance. And unfortunately for people like that, Satanism, as a matter of inherent principle, says you have to deliver the goods. It's not like other religions where you're considered devout the more you submit to the religion. Satanism doesn't work like that. No, as a Satanist, you devote to yourself. As we say, Satanism demands study, not worship. And this goes back to a point I made in the previous episode where in the early 1970s, the Church of Satan tried experimenting with having different ranks and different colored medallions and robe trim color and written exams. It seemed like a fun and cool thing to do at first, but then Anton LaVey noticed some people became too focused on studying for the exams and advancing their rank for the sake of advancing rank, instead of living Satanism, applying the philosophy to their lives. Anyway, I won't go on rehashing Satansplain episode number 36. You can go listen to that. Instead, I'm just going to take a quick break right now. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
In 1966, Anton LaVey created the Church of Satan, marking the beginning of the Age of Fire and Year 1 Anno Satanas. In 1969, he published the Satanic Bible, codifying Satanism as a religion, the first time it's been done in human history.
In the name of Satan, ruler of the earth, king of hell, come forth from the pit, bestow the blessings of hell upon us. For we are your children, and we invoke thee this night.
In 2001, I was appointed High Priest of the Church of Satan. In 2007, I published the Satanic Scriptures, further defining and expanding on satanic philosophy and greater magic ritual.
Hail, Satan full of might! Hail, Satan full of might! Our allegiance is with thee! Our allegiance is with thee! Cursed are they! Cursed are they! The God adorers! The God adorers! And cursed are the worshippers! And cursed are the worshippers! Of the Nazarene eunuch! Of the Nazarene eunuch!
For the past 50 years, the Church of Satan has stood as the sole organization to define and defend Satanism as a religion. And though pretenders to the infernal throne have come and gone, we have stood the test of time and will into the future. Visit churchofsatan.com for more information and read the Satanic Bible and the Satanic Scriptures. Knowledge is the solution for ignorance. Hail, Satan!
Hail, Satan! Hail, Satan!
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the official website, satansplain.com. You can also email me. bill@satansplain.com is the email address. Satansplain is also on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. You can listen to Satansplain on the main website. Listen to episodes there or on YouTube or Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and a host of other places. Many ways to listen to Satansplain. So in this episode, I'm just reading and responding to some listener mail, and you people have been sending in your Satanecdotes, which I've been reading and replying to. Let's read one of these now. This one I have here is kind of a shocking one, more shocking than funny, in my opinion. Well, let's cue the Satanecdote theme song.
Satanic anecdotes. Satanecdotes.
Jordan writes in, he says, I was working for a company at the time trying to sign some new clients when one of my coworkers discovered I was a Satanist. He was an older gentleman who I did not know personally, though. I had heard he was a bit of a heavy drinker. Anyways, he took it upon himself to do a little reading of the Satanic Bible and then tried to angrily confront me about my religious choices being unacceptable. So on a side note, wow, a Christian who actually read the book first. That is rare. Anyway, continuing. Jordan says, being no stranger to this type of behavior, I detached from the situation and calmly let him know that it's none of his business and I don't care how he feels about my personal choices. See, this kind of goes back to the point I made about, what Angela said, writing in, nobody's business. Thinking the situation would not escalate further, I continued to look for and sign new clients and fulfill my professional responsibilities, until one day he decided that lack of reading comprehension or literacy is a great excuse to become a criminal. He started stealing away my business and trying to put the company under, and under such things, using Satanic Statement number 6 as an excuse to break the law and hold me responsible for his crimes. Now, as most of you, I'm sure, already know, Satanic Statement number 6 says Satan represents responsibility to the responsible, instead of concern for psychic vampires. Continuing on with the email, he even claimed in front of the courts that Satanic Statement number 6 means I am responsible for irresponsible people, not responsible for myself. And that the whole religion is a purposeful contradiction created that way to give a sense of strength, and that this is why Satanists are all criminals and pathological liars and can never be trusted. The usual fundamentalist crazies. Actually, Jordan, I would argue that this is a whole new level of crazy, not the usual fundy thing. Anyways, it is likely he will be spending the rest of his life behind bars thinking he could outsmart everybody without doing research and just creating a lot of hype. So I wrote back to Jordan. I said, yikes, I guess it's good that things worked out in the end, legally. And I asked if this Christian coworker of his had been formally charged yet. And Jordan wrote back to me and said he is, quote, still waiting on the next court date for the final rulings. In fact, it's been a few years of process. But he says the lunatic has no substantial evidence, and meanwhile, Jordan will just keep going up the ladder if the judge rules otherwise. Well, good to hear that. But, my goodness, the level of insanity here. What was the mental process of this coworker? I don't like the fact that you're a Satanist, so I'm going to do a bunch of irresponsible things that damage the company, which means they damage myself in the process. But when the judge asks why, I'll say it's because I was following a line in your religion, Satanism, even though I'm not a Satanist, and the line is the exact opposite of what I did. I mean, this is like, what analogy can I use? It's like me being upset with the fact my coworker is Jewish and thinking that the best way to turn the company against him is to throw a bucket of pig's blood on the front door of every office. Or maybe onto the clients too. Throw a bucket of pig's blood on them. And then when I get into trouble, I'll say, well, gee whiz, I was just practicing my coworker's religion. Joshua's Jewish. I was practicing Judaism, even though the Hebrew scriptures say something about not touching pork. But, there was that story about Passover and blood on the doors. So I'm no less to blame than Joshua here. Send him the cleaning bill. Again, insanity. I just don't even know how to begin with that. By the way, if you hear like a bunch of like banging noises in the background, I apologize. I got some people working on the house and lots of other things I'm doing, so I'm trying to record this when I can. Anyway, I've got one final email here I have saved to the end. This is from Boris. Boris writes, "Thank you for mentioning an FBI interview of LaVey in one of those episodes. I read it and found a couple of noteworthy things. In particular, the following on page 23 of the report. Quote, LaVey stated that he is well aware that most people associated with the Church of Satan are in fact, quote, fanatics, cultists, and weirdos, unquote. He stated his interest in the Church of Satan is strictly from a monetary point of view." Boris continues, "I would be suspicious if a Satanist claimed he had charitable intentions when incorporating his business. Thus, this phrase, although remarkable, didn't make me think much. I also guess LaVey's attitude toward the Church of Satan changed through time, and from what I see now, I don't believe money is the only reason for the current high priest and high priestess to run the church. Quite the contrary, the first part about, quote, fanatics, cultists, and weirdos seems to be a direct citation according to the report format and style. Initially made my eyebrows rise. Of course, we can only guess what LaVey wanted to say by that. I suspect many people would call me a weirdo, and often I won't disagree, but after contemplating a bit, I started to ask myself how many Church of Satan members are Satanists. All the administration knows about registered members is their possession of a state-issued ID, a postal address, and the membership fee. And Boris goes on here to ask, how do we know we don't get, clueless devil worshippers joining or criminals or whomever? Since some people get their membership terminated after sending an active membership application, I remember Maganodramia mentioning such cases, there were the Church of Satan members who were not Satanists. But what do you think? Does it seem LaVey meant he believed that most people associated with the Church of Satan were, in fact, not Satanists back in 1980? Do you think most of the Church of Satan members are now Satanists? Or do you think most of the Church of Satan members now are Satanists, rather? So before I read my response, just to give you the backstory for those who don't know, this document he's talking about, back in 1980, somebody made the claim that Anton LaVey was involved in a plot to kill Senator Ted Kennedy. From those of you outside of the U.S. who don't know who that is or don't know what was going on at the time, to explain it to you briefly, we have the elections for president every 4 years, and in 1980, Jimmy Carter was president and finishing his first term and was running to be elected for a second term for another 4 years. And the person he ended up running against was Ronald Reagan. Carter lost that re-election, and in November of 1980, Ronald Reagan won the election, became the new president of the United States. Now, Ted Kennedy was a senator of my state, Massachusetts. He was the younger brother of John F. Kennedy, the president who was assassinated in 1963. And the Kennedys, as well as Jimmy Carter, were with the Democrat Party. Ted Kennedy was originally trying to get the nomination to run for president for the Democrat Party, but he didn't get it, and Jimmy Carter, as I said, ended up rerunning to try to win another term as president. Regardless, Ted Kennedy was, I guess, kind of a high-profile politician at the time. Plus, his brothers John and Robert Kennedy were politicians who had been assassinated. So I guess the FBI figured any claim from anybody about assassinating any other Kennedy was, worth investigating. There's a long-standing belief called the Kennedy curse. There's even a Wikipedia page about this, where members of the Kennedy family, have died in strange deaths. There was even a punk band, called the Dead Kennedys. It was such a trend. Anyway, this FBI report on the supposed plot by Anton LaVey to kill Ted Kennedy was not even released to the public until 40 years later in June of 2020 on the FBI's website. So, having said all that, with that all of the way, here is my response to Boris. There are some idiots out there, namely idiots who for some reason have an axe to grind with the Church of Satan, and they get a boner over this FBI report. They get a boner over that particular quote. The fact that they had to dig through, what was it, like 80 pages or 50 pages of the report of an obscure document from a 1980 investigation based on a false allegation. The fact that they had to go through all of that to find anything bad about Anton LaVey they can put on Wikipedia or Reddit, it just goes to show you how desperate and pathetic some people like that can be. But like you said, Boris, we have no idea what the context of that quote was. Did LaVey say that the media and Christians have wrongly associated the COS with fanatics, cultists, and weirdos? Did Anton LaVey say that the Church of Satan sometimes gets approached by fanatics, cultists, and weirdos, whom, of course, we have to turn away in cases if they're going to be more trouble than they're worth? Was Anton LaVey quoting somebody else? Did those quoted words not actually come from LaVey, but came from one of the FBI agents, and LaVey repeated it back in conversation, or disagreed but didn't completely disagree in some way? Again, we have no way of telling from what little is said in the report. Now, it also could have very well been the case that LaVey was being facetious, maybe just to get the FBI to rightfully leave him alone. I mean, personally, that makes the most sense to me. Because this was 1980, there was Michelle Remembers and the start of the Satanic Panic, and here was the Church of Satan being hounded as, for being connected with an attempted assassination of a U.S. senator, just based on somebody's raving say-so. So, being put in that situation, what would Anton LaVey have to lose by downplaying what the Church of Satan is? The avoidance of two particular satanic sins come to mind here. First of all, counterproductive pride. LaVey was obviously proud of the Church of Satan and made it his life's work, really, but I don't see what would be gained by being high and mighty about it, about lying to the feds about it. And the other satanic sin, of course, is solipsism. Would this agent or agents who approached him necessarily have the intellect and open-mindedness to understand a philosophical lesson on what Satanism really is and isn't, and why trying to assassinate somebody, particularly somebody you've never even met, not really make any sense in the context of Satanism? Trying to explain what we really do believe and practice? I don't know. Somehow I think that would go over the heads. It goes over the heads of most people, and I don't see why the feds would be any exception. But regardless of what actually was the context of that quote, buried in this enormous FBI report, it would be quite stupid to think that, despite all the LaVey's work with the Church of Satan as its leader and author and a representative, that he sincerely believed the Church of Satan to be nothing but fanatics, cultists, and weirdos. I mean, if he really wanted to play to that crowd, his writings, I think, would be tailored to that, and they're quite not. We would be turning people away. We would be accepting people that we turn away now, for that matter. So, it's been quite the opposite in many ways. I mean, also, aside from all this, why Ted Kennedy? Like, granted, he did some shitty stuff in 1969. Go look up the incident with him driving his car home from a party one night. But I mean, if, and that is a hypothetical if, in case any feds are listening, if, hypothetically, a Satanist were to assassinate a politician, why Ted Kennedy? Like, wouldn't you expect it to be, I don't know, a really religious right-wing sort of politician, like Jesse Helms or somebody at the time? Again, it just doesn't make any sense on any level. But getting back to Boris's other questions, as for how many registered members in the Church of Satan are real Satanists and how many are just clueless mystics or cult expert Christians trying to spy on us, federal agents from the Satanic Panic era trying to keep tabs on us, or some eccentric just trying to collect religious memberships as a novelty, as a hobby, I don't know. I don't know, and it's not something I worry about. I think it's safe to assume that most people who would go through all that trouble to pay the membership fee and, write to the Church of Satan and join would be people who are actually serious about their convictions. I mean, after all, having that process filters out Even some people who understand the Satanic Bible enough to call themselves Satanists, yet are still afraid to join or feel they're not ready to join the Church of Satan for some reason or another. Now, having said all of that, believe it or not, I have known a couple of non-Satanists who've joined the Church of Satan as registered members. I'm in Massachusetts, like I said, and I know a lot of witches in the city of Salem. For those who don't know, Salem, Massachusetts was not only the place of the infamous Salem witch trials in the late 1600s, but since the 1970s or so, it's become a place where a lot of self-identifying witches live and do business. A lot are Wiccans, but there are other people who aren't Wiccans and aren't Satanists, but identify as witches who practice witchcraft. And I personally knew several witches who, despite not being Satanists, they really enjoyed the book, The Satanic Witch. They really, really loved Anton LaVey's approach to lesser magic, which, is our version of witchcraft, really. Also, some of the philosophy of Satanism, they liked that. They felt that it all really, really benefited them. They felt that what they got out of the Satanic Witch, if they had to put a price on it, was worth more than what we charge for a lifetime membership in the Church of Satan. So they bought a membership as a way to say thanks. So I won't lie, some people like that do exist in the Church of Satan. It's rare, but it's not zero. You won't find them becoming priests or magisters. But, given that Satanism is not a congregational religion, you're not required to go to church somewhere or even talk to other members. It's a religion that also makes no promises. You get out of life what you put into it, and the same for Satanism. Given all that, we don't have a problem if somebody wants to give us money to say thanks. But, again, I have a hard time believing that most people who'd be Church of Satan members, who would go through all that effort, would be people who didn't understand Satanism or didn't identify as Satanists. You can go to online forums, for example, with Church of Satan members or Church of Satan affiliated events, and yeah, everybody you talk to there is a Satanist, really. I mean, you could extend this logic to just about anything. How many of the people buying eggs from the grocery store are really going to eat those eggs? How do we know they're not just bringing them home to sit on them and pretend to be hens? Well, I don't think it's blind faith to assume that most people who buy eggs end up eating them. So, anyway, maybe not the most perfect analogy, but still a good analogy, I think. And I've kind of gone off a tangent here. Let's get back to Boris's email. So Boris wrote back to me, and just to be clear, we've talked back and forth, and it didn't seem like he was asking these questions out of malice or some kind of gotcha. It's hard to tell the tone sometimes, from written text. But since he brought up the idea of making money by running the Church of Satan, I have heard people, not Boris, but I have heard other people make this accusation that the Church of Satan is some kind of money scam, and this one line from this one FBI report proves it. These people, I swear, just can't do math. If you were trying to make money off of people, why would you have a religion that precisely does not appeal to the masses, that turns off the masses by design? Why would you charge a one-time lifetime membership fee? Because if you're trying to make money, that's a bad marketing strategy. You have these members who've been in the organization for 20, 30 or more years and haven't paid the administration anything beyond the lifetime membership fee. And then people who've joined the organization but quit or, get kicked out a year or two later, whatever the case may be. Yet, there are some people who think getting the same total amount of money from both of those is a good scamming strategy. Again, it makes no sense, and I can only assume the people making these sorts of accusations just suck at math. Never mind the fact that what would be wrong with doing something for the money anyway? I like money. I'm a Satanist. Greed is good. You can't shame me for being materialistic. I'm a Satanist. Your Jedi guilt trips have no power over me, little socialist screamer. Sith Lords for the win. Yeah, that's a strange line to end an episode with, but I think I'm going to end it right there. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time on Satansplain. Hail Satan. You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at Satansplain.com. And for more information about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2023, Magister Bill M.